What's going on, Muscle Monsters? Alain Gonzalez here, and today we have a Q&A video. These questions are coming from my Instagram, so if you're not already following me on there, make sure to do so at Muscle Monsters. And without further ado, let's jump right in. The first question is, what's your number one advice to someone who wants to gain weight and build muscle? My number one advice is find a proven program and stick to that. I don't want you to worry about how much protein, how many reps, or what are the best exercises, etc. I want you to get into the habit of going to the gym on a consistent basis and learning the lifts. Once you've learned the lifts and are or have created a habit of going to the gym, then and only then you can start worrying about the other details. But first, right now, I want you to find a program, whether it's starting strength or my mass in a flash for novice lifters, and stick to that, okay? Next question. How do you suggest building muscle for, say, a high schooler that's committed to track and field? You're going to have to eat enough, all right? Your energy expenditure is through the roof, and if you want to ensure that, number one, you have that same energy for your sport, plus you're building muscle and have that energy for the weight room, you're going to have to be intentional about the amount of calories that you're consuming. All right, a good place to start might be 20 times body weight. Eat that many calories every day, and then make sure that you're weighing yourself daily so that you can keep track of what's actually happening. If you're losing weight, for example, on average, then you probably need more calories. If you're maintaining your weight, then you probably want to eat a little bit more just to be in that slight surplus so that you know that you're eating enough to build muscle, but more importantly, to keep that intensity in your sport. Okay, as far as training goes, something maybe more minimalist, some kind of a 5x5, maybe even starting strength 2 or 3 times a week, focusing on the big heavy compounds, not worrying too much about bicep curls and things of that nature, but more so on the big heavy bench press, deadlift, squat, bent rows, and all the other big exercises that are going to put on overall muscle mass and allow you to gain overall strength. All right. Next question. Please explain how having a caloric surplus and not getting fat. All right. If you are consuming more calories than you're expending, you are going to put on some fat. Now, although we can't avoid putting on fat, we can reduce the amount of fat that we gain. All right. Number one is you have to ensure that your caloric surplus is not too high. Now, if you're a beginner, your surplus can be a little bit higher than someone who's been training for a few years because you can actually build muscle a little bit faster. All right. So that's something that you want to take into consideration. On top of that, you have to be stimulating muscle growth in the gym. All right. If you're eating enough to gain weight, but you're not stimulating muscle growth, then chances are you're going to build fat because you're not actually stimulating new muscle growth. Okay? Another thing I might suggest is go higher on the carbs and lower on the fats. Okay? Fats are more efficiently stored as body fat than carbs, especially for those of us who are training frequently. Okay? Carbs have to go through a process or mechanism known as de novo lipogenesis, and thus it makes it damn near impossible for us to store carbs as body fat. All right? And plus, the extra carbs are actually going to benefit your workouts a little bit more than the extra fat. Next question. Is a testosterone booster important? No. All right? There's no testosterone booster on the market that I know of that's going to increase your testosterone in a way that will make a physiological difference in the amount of muscle you're able to build. Okay? Another question from Winfield Gold. Say you exercise and you have a calorie surplus by dirty bulking. Can this work? How important are the macros? Yes, you can build muscle by dirty bulking, of course. The problem is that typically on a dirty bulk, and the reason that most people get confused when we talk about clean versus dirty bulking is because they think that dirty bulking is just eating junk food to get bigger. It's not. Dirty bulking really just means that your surplus is higher. Okay? You're not kind of tracking to ensure that you're gaining a certain amount of weight each week. You're just kind of eating as much as you can in order to build that muscle and to reach that caloric surplus. Okay, so the only problem with dirty bulking is that it's uncalculated. So if you ever stall, you're not going to know how many calories to add in order to continue growing. But on top of that, because you are not keeping a mindful eye on how high that surplus is, you are going to ultimately build more fat faster. Thus, the amount of time that you're going to be spending bulking up and actually putting on muscle is going to be reduced if you're not more calculated. But yes, it can certainly work. Plenty of people do it. It's a viable option, but not something that I would recommend. All right. Next question. For a young lifter, is there a genetic limit to how big you can get? There's a genetic limit for anybody, right? We all have limits that we cannot go beyond just because we're human. All right, and so the answer is yes. However, because as you're training, you're also getting older, right? It's not something that you have to worry about. What you need to worry about is continuously training to get better. And as you get older to a certain point, those kind of barriers or limits will increase and you'll continue growing. It's not going to get to the point where you'll get so big, so fast that you can't get any bigger and more jacked or stronger until you get older. It's not going to happen that quickly, especially if you are natural. Okay? Next question. Is protein powder necessary? No. Okay? Protein powder is something that I recommend only if you're having a hard time eating enough protein for the day. If you, like me, can have all of your protein, no problem, without supplementing it, then there's really no reason to have protein powder. Now, convenience comes into play. Maybe you want to make shakes. Maybe you like the way it tastes. Maybe you're short on time. Whatever the case may be, then yes, it's perfectly fine. However, it's not necessary. Next question. How many meals per day if you're naturally skinny? Or how many calories? Okay, the amount of meals is not important. What's important is that you are eating enough to reach that caloric surplus in order to gain weight and build muscle. All right, now that said though, for some guys it's easier to have 3,000 calories if you eat 6 times than it is if you eat 3 times. All right, so that's going to be completely up to you. You also have to consider your schedule. How many meals does your schedule allow you to consume in a day? Try to maximize that. So if you have time to eat 4 or 5 times a day, then eat 4 or 5 times a day. If you only have time to eat 3 times, then make sure they're big, hefty meals. The amount of calories, however, you can figure out quite easily. Take your body weight in pounds, multiply it by 20, and start there. Now track your weight every morning, and at the end of the week get an average. If that average is going up, then that means you're eating enough. If it's not, then you just increase the calories and continue doing that until you stall again and repeat. Next question. I do the same exercises for arm day, chest day, etc. Is it necessary to change up your workouts to ensure or accelerate muscle growth? Not necessarily. What's important is that you get stronger. So more importantly than changing up the exercises is how you're periodizing your training. All right, so if your training is not set up in a way that's allowing you to get stronger at these lifts, then that's what I would consider changing or tweaking rather than the exercises. It's also going to depend on how long you've been lifting. Someone who's been lifting for under a year is less likely to need to change exercises than someone who's been training for 5 years. Next question. Ever had any injuries that sidelined you during training? Knock on wood. To this day, I haven't had any injuries that have stopped me from training. Maybe a little tweak here or there that maybe stopped me from bench pressing for less than a week. Nothing that I've ever had to completely change my training up for, see a doctor or anything like that. I've always been pretty smart in how I've trained. I don't do anything crazy. I don't use crazy form. I always try to keep my form dialed in, and I'm pretty intuitive in the sense that I know how much I can handle, and so that's always allowed me to train consistently, right, over the years without ever getting hurt. Next question. What is your opinion on nucleus overload training? I'll be quite honest with you, I'm not too familiar with nucleus overload training. It sounds a bit gimmicky, and from what I've read or heard about it, it requires you to overtrain, but the problem is that overtraining, right, is a predefined term, and it doesn't produce any positive result. Now, if that person who came up with nucleus overload training was really just talking about overreaching, right? Pushing your body to a point where you're overreaching and then pulling back before overtraining in order to get that kind of slingshot effect of hypertrophy, right? That super compensation, then that's completely feasible. And it's something that I recommend, particularly if you want to build a specific muscle group up. The thing is that I don't like the term overtraining, that you're purposely overtraining. I understand that maybe you need to reach to that point where you're almost overtraining, which is known as overreaching. But again, overtraining is a predefined term, and it's nothing but negative. You never want to overtrain. Okay? Next question. I got chicken calves, man. Any tips or ideas to increase my calf size? I've always had them small growing up, and I do leg day, but it's just my calves. I have the same issue. My calves don't grow as quickly as most other muscle groups. What you have to understand about the calves, though, is that because we're using them every day, right? Pretty much all day if you're walking a lot, they can handle a lot of volume. Okay, so if you want to build your calves, all right, you're going to have to train them frequently, 3, 4, maybe even 5 times per week. Okay, another thing is you want to train them through the full range of motion. So instead of bouncing them up and down, you want to bring your foot or your ankle all the way down. Make sure to get that nice stretch. Stay there for a few seconds so that you remove that momentum, right? Then bring it all the way up onto your tippy toes to get that nice full contraction. Bring it down slowly and repeat. Another thing is a lot of people fail to train their calves like other muscle groups, right? We get stronger and thus we grow bigger. The calves are the same way. If we can get stronger, if we can progress in, say, for example, calf raises, you're also going to stimulate growth. Next question. What do you think about push-pull legs 6 times per week? What's your best tips to increase the bench press? What do you like about living in Florida? Okay, push-pull legs 6 times a week. It's cool. It's a routine that I used to do where it's push-pull legs, rest, repeat. The problem with push-pull legs, repeat is that not most people don't have enough time to train 6 times a week, and there's other variations of training that work just as good, if not better, right? Because you're getting more rest in between sessions or just on a weekly basis, but still producing the same amount of growth, okay? So it's a great routine, not something that I recommend for most people just because it's not practical, but if you like being in the gym and you have the time, then go for it. I don't see any problem with it at all. The best tip to increase the bench press, number 1, bench press frequently. And then number 2, and this is something that most people ignore even though it's obvious, is really dial in your form. My bench press went up without me actually getting stronger the most when I tweaked or perfected rather, and I wouldn't say perfected because maybe to this day it's still not perfect, but when I focused on better form, okay, retracting the scapula, staying nice and tight, pushing through your feet, and those little things like that are what will take your bench press from 185 to 225 without changing much in your training. right? In that first year of training, I see it all the time. Guys are in the gym, their feet are dancing around, their shoulders are forward when they're bench pressing. Those small changes, keeping your scapula retracted, right? And keeping your core braced, pushing through your feet, right, for that leg drive, that's what's going to increase your bench press more than anything, especially in the beginning. All right, that and then the frequency, obviously, from doing the bench press so frequently is more practice. And the more practice you have, the better you get at the lift. If I maintain calories but get lots of protein, can I build muscle? I assume that you mean if you eat at maintenance. The answer to your question is no. You don't have to. That increase in protein is not what's going to yield more muscle growth. There's only so much protein we can synthesize, and we're already getting enough if we're getting that 1 gram per pound of body weight. However, that said, you can build muscle at maintenance. All right, it's just going to happen a bit slower. But if you are eating at maintenance, getting enough protein, and you're getting stronger in the gym, you are going to build muscle. Do you recommend eating in maintenance or surplus as a beginner? And how long do you think someone should stick to their training plan before changing it up as a beginner? All right, I recommend eating in a slight surplus, maybe even a little bit higher of a surplus if you're a naturally skinny guy who finds it hard to gain weight. But definitely you want to consume more calories than you're expending if you want to maximize muscle growth. And the second half of that question is, how long do you think someone should stick to the training plan before changing it up as a beginner? The short answer is stick to the plan as long as you are progressing. All right? Obviously, the rate of progression is going to slow down, but the goal is always progress. As long as you're getting stronger, you're getting better at the lifts, then you are progressing, and thus you should stick to that program. In most cases, you should be able to run your novice program and get good results for 12, 18, or even 24 months. All right? So that's pretty much it, guys. Q&A video. If you have any questions you want to ask, make sure you're following me on Instagram at Muscle Monsters, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.